I stared at my phone, reading the text message for the fifth time, my hands trembling slightly. I know what you're hiding, Marin. We should talk before Everett finds out. My mother-in-law's words glowed accusingly on the screen. My name is Marin, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought the worst thing about my relationship with my mother-in-law was her constant reminders about my food allergies. You know, the subtle jabs about how complicated I make family dinners, or how Everett's ex-girlfriend Camille could eat anything without making a fuss. I was standing in our kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the windows, when the message arrived. The coffee I'd been sipping turned bitter in my mouth. What could Lorna possibly think she knew about me? I'd always been an open book, sometimes to a fault. Hey, beautiful. Everett's voice made me jump. I quickly locked my phone and set it face down on the counter. He wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, and I forced myself to relax into his embrace. You okay? You seem tense. Just your mom being? Your mom, I said, trying to keep my voice light. She wants to talk. Everett's arms stiffened slightly. What about? She didn't say. The lie felt heavy on my tongue, but I needed time to figure this out. Probably another lecture about cross-contamination in her kitchen. He sighed, his breath warm against my neck. I'll talk to her again about the allergy thing. She needs to understand it's not a choice you're making to be difficult. If only that were the real issue. I turned in his arms, studying his face, the kind eyes, the slight worry line between his brows that appeared whenever his mother came up in conversation. Remember when we first started dating, and you told me your mom was a bit protective? He laughed. Understatement of the century? Just a bit. I managed to smile, but my mind was racing. What could Lorna possibly think she had on me? I never cheated, never lied about anything important. The only secret I kept was, but no, she couldn't know about that. Nobody knew about that. My phone buzzed again. Everett reached for it, but I snatched it first. Sorry, probably work, I said, stepping away. His expression flickered with confusion at my sudden movement. Another message from Lorna. I'm coming over this afternoon. We can discuss the photo I found while cleaning out the attic. My blood ran cold. The attic, where Walter, my father-in-law, had stored boxes of old family photos, including ones from before I met Everett. Before I changed my name. Before I became the person I am today. I need to run some errands, I said quickly, already grabbing my purse. I'll pick up dinner on my way home? Marin? Everett's voice stopped me at the door. You'd tell me if something was really wrong, right? I looked back at my husband, the man who'd loved me unconditionally for the past 5 years, who'd chosen me despite his mother's constant comparisons to perfect Camille, who didn't know that the woman he married had reinvented herself long before we met. Of course, I lied again, hating myself for it. Everything's fine. As I drove away, my phone kept buzzing with messages I couldn't bear to read. Lorna had finally found the ammunition she'd been looking for since the day Everett brought me home. The question was, what would she do with it? The truth about my past wasn't just my secret to keep. It was my survival story. And I'd be damned if I'd let Lorna twist it into something ugly. But first, I needed to know exactly what she'd found in that attic. I pulled into Lorna and Walter's driveway, my heart pounding against my ribs. The familiar colonial house loomed before me, its pristine white exterior masking the tension that always lurked inside. I'd driven here instead of running errands, knowing I needed to face this head-on. Walter's truck wasn't in the driveway, small mercies. At least I'd only have to deal with Lorna. Before I could reach the front door, it swung open. Lorna stood there in her perfectly pressed slacks and cashmere sweater, a manila envelope in her hands. I wasn't expecting you so soon, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. But I'm glad you came. The formal living room felt cold despite the summer heat outside. Family photos lined the walls, dozens of them tracking Everett's life. I noticed, not for the first time, how many included Camille. 8 years of dating captured in frozen moments, while my 5 years of marriage warranted only 2 frames. Would you like some tea? Lorna asked, already moving toward the kitchen. I bought those special allergen-free cookies you can eat. Though I suppose that was unnecessary, wasn't it? My stomach clenched. What exactly do you think you know, Lorna? She set the envelope on the coffee table between us. I was cleaning the attic last weekend. Walter's been after me for months to organize all those old boxes. She paused, studying my face. I found something interesting in his old case files. Walter's career as a private investigator. Of course. I should have known he'd have access to that kind of information. Whatever you found. Sarah Mitchell, Lorna said quietly, and my world tilted. That was your name before, wasn't it? Before you became Maren Collins. I heard voices in the foyer, Walter's deep rumble and, to my horror, Everett's familiar tone. My hands started shaking. Mom, Everett called out. Your car's not in the garage, but the door was open. He stopped short in the living room doorway, Walter right behind him. Maren, what are you doing here? Perfect timing, Lorna said, reaching for the envelope. We were just about to look at some interesting photographs. Walter stepped forward, his face darkening. Lorna, don't. She's been lying to our son for years, Walter. He deserves to know who he really married. Mom, what are you talking about? Everett moved to stand beside my chair, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder. I stood up, shrugging off his touch. I can explain. Can you? Lorna pulled out a newspaper clipping. Can you explain why Sarah Mitchell disappeared 10 years ago, right after her father's arrest for running a Ponzi scheme that ruined hundreds of lives? Or why she emerged 3 years later as Maren Collins, with a convenient list of life-threatening allergies that make her seem so fragile and in need of protection? That's enough, Walter snapped, but the damage was done. Everett stared at me, his face unreadable. Maren, I changed my name legally, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I didn't do anything wrong. My father did terrible things, yes, but I helped the investigation. I'm the one who turned him in. After taking your share? Lorna pressed. The money that disappeared with Sarah Mitchell was returned to the victims. Walter cut in. All of it. I know because I worked the case. He turned to his wife, disgust evident in his expression. Which you knew when you found my files. You just chose to leave that part out. The silence that followed was deafening. Everett hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. I couldn't bear to look at him. I think, Walter said quietly, you should leave, Lorna.
Take a drive.
Think about what you're doing to this family. I'm protecting this family, she insisted, but her voice wavered. No. Everett finally spoke, his tone ice cold. You're destroying it. And if you ever try to hurt Maren again, you'll lose me too. I felt his hand slip into mine, warm and steady. But as we walked out together, leaving Lorna standing alone in her perfect living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. She'd exposed my past, yes, but she didn't know everything. And the parts she didn't know? Those were the ones that could really tear this family apart. The next morning, I found Walter sitting alone at the local diner, nursing a cup of coffee. He didn't seem surprised when I slid into the booth across from him. The breakfast crowd's chatter provided a buffer of white noise around us, making it feel safer to talk. You knew, I said quietly. All this time, you knew who I was. He pushed a manila folder across the table, different from the one Lorna had yesterday. I kept copies of everything. Figured this day might come. He paused as the waitress refilled his cup. What Lorna doesn't know is that I've been watching her, too. I opened the folder and froze. Inside was a photo of Lorna having lunch with Camille, dated just last week. She's still in contact with her? More than that. Walter's face was grim. They've been plotting. Lorna's been feeding Camille information about your marriage, your medical conditions. They're trying to prove your allergies are fake. My hands started trembling. Why are you showing me this? Because my wife is about to do something stupid. He pulled out another document. She's hired a private investigator, not me, obviously, to dig deeper into your past. But she's not going to find what she thinks she will, is she? I stared at my reflection in the window, remembering the scared 19-year-old girl who discovered her father's crimes.
No.
She won't. The money that disappeared? Walter's voice was gentle. The part she thinks you stole? I know where it really went. I know what you did with it. You never told her? Wasn't my story to tell. He leaned forward. But maybe it's time you did. Before she does more damage trying to protect Everett from a threat that doesn't exist. My phone buzzed, a text from Everett. Mom just showed up at the house. Says she needs to talk to both of us. Where are you? She's moving faster than I thought, Walter muttered, reading the message over my shoulder. Maren, listen to me. Lorna's not just afraid of losing Everett. She's afraid of losing her identity as his protector. After what happened with Camille. What had happened with Camille? I asked. Everyone tiptoes around it, but nobody ever tells me the whole story. Walter's expression darkened. Camille nearly bankrupted Everett. Convinced him to invest in her brother's business venture. It was a scam, but she claimed she didn't know. Lorna had to remortgage their house to help him recover. That's why she's so paranoid about me being another con artist? I laughed bitterly. Ironic, considering my background. The difference is you exposed the con. You didn't profit from it. He pulled out one final document, a newspaper article I'd never seen before. It detailed how an anonymous source had helped return millions to the victims of my father's scheme. You gave up your inheritance to make things right.
My phone buzzed again.
Everett. Mom's saying something about proof. Please come home. I stood up, gathering the documents. I need to go. Maren. Walter caught my arm. There's something else you should know. About why Lorna's so fixated on Camille. He hesitated. Camille's pregnant. And she's claiming it's Everett's. The world tilted sideways. That's impossible. They haven't been together in years. I know. But Lorna wants to believe it. Because if it's true, then she has a reason to push me out completely. I felt oddly calm, despite the bomb that had just been dropped. When did Camille tell her this? Yesterday morning, right before Lorna found my old case files about you. He gave me a meaningful look. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? I thought about the pregnancy test hidden in my bathroom drawer, the one I'd been too afraid to take. About how everything was about to get infinitely more complicated. Thank you, Walter, I said, already heading for the door, for showing me what I'm really up against. What are you going to do? I paused, thinking about the other secrets I'd been keeping, the ones that could either save my marriage or destroy it completely. I'm going to tell my husband the whole truth, before his mother and ex-girlfriend can twist it into something else. I sat in my car outside our house, staring at the pregnancy test I'd finally taken in the diner's bathroom. 2 pink lines.
Clear as day.
The irony of this timing wasn't lost on me, my news versus Camille's claim. But first, I had to deal with whatever scene was waiting inside. Lorna's Mercedes was parked in our driveway, looking as pristine and polished as its owner always did. Through the living room window, I could see her gesturing animatedly while Everett sat with his head in his hands. The moment I walked in, Lorna's voice cut through the tension. Finally. Now we can discuss Camille's situation like adults. There is no situation, Everett said, standing up. Camille and I haven't been together in years. This is ridiculous. She says differently. Lorna pulled out her phone. She has proof of a meeting 3 months ago. My hand instinctively went to my stomach, but I forced it back down. Let me guess, at the Cardinal Hotel bar? They both turned to look at me. Everett's face showed confusion, Lorna's triumph. How did you know that? She asked. I pulled out my own phone, finding the photo Walter had given me. Because I know about your weekly lunches with Camille. I know you've been plotting this together. I turned to Everett. 3 months ago, your mother arranged for Camille to accidentally run into you at that bar. But you never showed up, did you? I was with you, he said slowly. We were at the hospital. Your allergic reaction to the new medication, which your mother knew about, I added. She knew exactly where you'd be that night. Just like she knows my entire medical history now, thanks to the private investigator she hired. Lorna's face paled slightly. How did you? Walter told me everything. I placed the folder of documents on the coffee table, including what really happened with Camille and the investment scam. That's not relevant, Lorna snapped. It's completely relevant. I took a deep breath. Because you're so afraid of history repeating itself that you can't see what's really happening. Camille's lying about the pregnancy, Lorna. just like she lied about not knowing her brother's business was a scam. Everett picked up the folder, his hands shaking slightly as he read. Mom, you've been meeting with her this whole time? Planning this? I was protecting you. No, he said quietly. You were trying to control me. Again. He looked up at me. What else haven't you told me? This was it. The moment to lay everything bare. Remember how I said I turned my father in? What I didn't tell you is why. I pulled out the final document Walter had given me. The money everyone thought I stole? I used it to repay his victims. All of it. Every penny I inherited, every asset I had. That's why I changed my name, not to hide, but to start over with nothing. Lorna grabbed the paper, her eyes widening as she read. This can't be. Your investigator won't find any hidden accounts or secret wealth, I continued. But he might find the thank you letters from the families I helped, or the testimony I gave that put my father away. I paused, my hand finally resting on my stomach. And now I need to protect my own family. Everett's eyes followed my movement, realization dawning on his face. Marin, I found out this morning, I said softly. Our baby deserves better than this endless suspicion and manipulation. So you need to choose, Everett. Both of you do. Lorna sank into the chair, the paper crumpling in her hands. You're pregnant.
Yes.
And unlike Camille's convenient claim, I can prove it. I turned to my husband. I love you, but I won't raise our child in this environment. Your mother needs help, Everett. Real help. Not enabling. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, a car door slammed and Walter's voice called out. Lorna? Are you ready to tell them the real reason you're so desperate to keep Everett close? I watched the color drain from my mother-in-law's face, and I realized we were about to uncover yet another layer of this family's carefully constructed facade. Whatever came next would either heal us or break us completely. But at least now, with my own secret revealed, I could face it honestly for my child's sake, if nothing else. Walter's words hung in the air as he entered our living room. The tension was thick enough to choke on, but Lorna's face, that's what caught my attention. Pure fear, something I'd never seen from her before. Don't, she whispered to Walter.
Please.
The pregnancy dinner is tomorrow, Walter said, ignoring her plea. Were you planning to serve that special cake you ordered? The one with the almond flour? My blood ran cold. Everett stepped forward. Mom, it's a family recipe, Lorna said quickly. I wanted to make something traditional to celebrate. To celebrate? Walter pulled out a receipt. Like you celebrated when you ordered that cake for Marin's birthday last year? The one that mysteriously got mixed up with a nut-free version at the last minute. I remembered that day, how Lorna had seemed almost disappointed when I didn't take a bite. How she'd insisted it was safe, but Walter had intercepted the plate. You knew about my allergies, I said softly. You knew exactly what almond flour would do to me. And now, Walter continued, with a grandchild on the way, were you hoping to prove Marin's allergies were fake? Or were you hoping for something worse? Everett's face had gone pale. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying your mother has been testing Marin's allergies for years. Small doses, watching for reactions. Like some twisted scientific experiment. The room started spinning. All those times I'd felt sick after family dinners, the mysterious reactions that didn't make sense. I had to know. Lorna burst out. Had to prove she was lying like everything else about her. You don't understand. I can't lose him again. Again? Everett's voice cracked. What are you talking about? Walter moved to stand beside his wife. Tell him, Lorna. Tell him about the baby you lost before Everett. About how it broke you so badly you couldn't bear the thought of losing another child. I watched understanding dawn on Everett's face. The brother you told me died of SIDS. That wasn't the whole story, was it? Lorna's composure crumbled. I was allergic to the medication they gave me during the pregnancy. The doctors didn't believe me when I said something was wrong. By the time they listened, she turned to me, her eyes wild. When Everett brought home another woman with mysterious allergies, claiming she needed special treatment, special care. You thought I was faking, I finished. Like you thought the doctors thought you were faking. I had to protect him by poisoning his wife. Walter's voice was harsh. By trying to prove she's lying, even if it killed her? The doorbell rang, making us all jump. Through the window, I saw Camille standing on our porch, one hand resting demonstratively on her stomach. Perfect timing, I said, feeling strangely calm. Should we invite her in? Let her explain how she's supposedly carrying your child, Everett? Or should we skip straight to the part where your mother orchestrated this whole thing?
No.
Everett moved to block the door. No more manipulation. No more lies. He turned to his mother. You need help, Mom. Real help. Not whatever this is. I'm trying to save you. You're trying to control me. And now you're trying to hurt my wife, my pregnant wife, to prove some twisted point.
He pulled out his phone.
I'm calling Dr. Richards, the same psychiatrist who helped you after James died. Either you agree to get help or what? Lorna's voice was barely a whisper. Or you'll never meet your grandchild. The words seemed to physically pain him. Your real grandchild. The doorbell rang again. Outside, Camille was peering through the window, her face falling as she took in the scene. I placed a hand on my stomach, thinking about cycles of pain and protection, about how fear can twist love into something dangerous. The cake, I said quietly. The one for tomorrow's dinner. Where is it? Lorna's silence was answer enough. Because I'm thinking, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart, that we should all have a slice. Together.
Right now.
And see who's really telling the truth about what's inside it. The cake sat in the middle of the dining room table like a bomb waiting to detonate. Lorna had retrieved it from her car, her hands shaking as she set it down. Camille still stood in the doorway, her fabricated pregnancy story forgotten in the tension of the moment. You first, Lorna, I said, cutting a slice. Show us how safe your family recipe is. This is ridiculous, she whispered, but I saw the fear in her eyes. Is it? Because I have my EpiPen right here. I placed it next to the plate. And I've already texted photos of this whole situation to my lawyer. So, if anything happens to me, I let the threat hang in the air. Everett grabbed my arm.
Madam, stop.
You're pregnant. We can't risk. Can't risk what? I pulled away from him. Can't risk proving that your mother has been slowly poisoning me for years? That she was planning to do it again, even knowing I'm carrying your child. I never meant to, Lorna started.
To what?
Kill me? Just make me sick enough to prove I'm lying? My voice cracked. Do you know what it feels like, Lorna? When your throat closes up. When you can't breathe, and every second feels like drowning? Walter stepped forward. I have the receipt from the bakery. The order specifically requested almond flour. Stop. Lorna's voice was barely audible. Please, just stop.
Why?
I picked up the knife again. Isn't this what you wanted? To expose the truth. Camille cleared her throat from the doorway. I should go.
No.
I pointed the knife at her. You're part of this too. The fake pregnancy story? That was supposed to be the backup plan, wasn't it? If the cake didn't work, I needed the money, Camille admitted quietly. Lorna said. Enough. Everett's shout made us all jump. This ends now. Mom, eat the cake. Lorna stared at her son, tears streaming down her face. I lost one son. I couldn't lose another. So, you tried to kill my wife instead? I just wanted proof. She grabbed the fork, hands trembling.
Fine.
I'll show you. Everything happened in slow motion. Lorna lifted the fork to her mouth, but her hand was shaking so badly that crumbs fell onto her blouse. As she swallowed, her eyes went wide. Mom, Everett stepped toward her. Lorna's hand went to her throat. I can't breathe. Walter rushed to her side. Lorna, what's wrong? The medication, she gasped. My allergy to the new heart medication. My EpiPen clattered to the floor as realization hit. The same allergies she'd accused me of faking, she had them too. Different trigger, same result. Call 911, Walter shouted, lowering Lorna to the floor as she struggled for breath. I grabbed my EpiPen and knelt beside her. This will help, but it's going to hurt. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw everything. The fear, the guilt, the desperate need to protect what she loved, even if it meant destroying it. I saw myself in a twisted way. How thin the line was between protection and destruction. The EpiPen clicked as I pressed it into her thigh. Lorna's body jerked, her hand gripping mine with surprising strength. "I'm sorry," she whispered as the medication took effect. "I'm so sorry." Sirens wailed in the distance. Camille had disappeared, leaving the front door open. Everett stood frozen, watching his mother fight for breath on the floor, saved by the very person she'd tried to harm. "The baby," Lorna gasped. "Will you ever let me?" "That depends," I said, still holding her hand as the paramedics rushed in. "On whether you get help. Real help." As they loaded Lorna into the ambulance, I stared at the cake still sitting on the table. One bite had almost killed her. One bite would have killed me. The ultimate proof of truth, delivered in the cruelest way possible. Walter turned to me, his face aged 10 years in the last hour. "Why did you save her?" "Because," I said, watching the ambulance drive away, "sometimes the best revenge is forcing someone to live with what they've done." 3 days after the cake incident, I found myself sitting across from Lorna in the hospital's psychiatric ward. The room was stark white, making her look smaller, older somehow. The bruise from the EpiPen injection was still visible on her thigh. "Walter's leaving me," she said without preamble. Her voice was raw, whether from the allergic reaction or crying, I couldn't tell. "He's already packed his things." I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling the slight swell that only I could detect so far. "Did you ever actually check the ingredients in that cake? Or did you just assume I was lying about my allergies, like you assumed everything else?" She flinched. I was so sure that I was manipulating Everett, using my allergies to control him. I leaned forward. "The way you used your grief over James to control your family? You don't understand what it's like to lose a child." "No, but I understand what it's like to lose everything else." I pulled out an old photograph, me as Sarah Mitchell, standing next to my father at a charity gala. When I turned him in, I lost my name, my family, my entire identity. But I did it because it was right. Lorna's hands trembled as she took the photo. "Why are you here, Marin?" "Because I need to know if you're capable of change. Real change. Not just for Everett's sake, or this baby's, but for yourself." A nurse appeared in the doorway with medication, but Lorna waved her away. "I don't deserve another chance." "Maybe not. But this isn't about what you deserve." I stood up, moving to leave. "It's about breaking the cycle." "Wait." Her voice cracked. "There's something else you need to know. About James. About what really happened." I sat back down slowly, watching her face crumple. The allergic reaction? It wasn't just the medication. I'd been taking risks, eating things I shouldn't, trying to prove I wasn't really allergic, that the doctors were wrong. She wrapped her arms around herself. "When I got pregnant, I kept doing it, kept testing my limits, until understanding dawned, horrible and clear. You blamed yourself for James's death. And then Everett brought you home, with your careful food checks and medical alerts, and all I could see was myself. My weakness. The same weakness that killed my baby." Tears streamed down her face. "I had to prove you were faking. Had to prove it wasn't real. Because if your allergies were real, then you'd have to accept that yours were too," I finished. "That James's death wasn't because you were weak, but because no one believed you." A sound from the doorway made us both turn. Everett stood there, his face ashen. "Mom, how long have you been there?" Lorna whispered. "Long enough." He moved into the room, standing between us. "Why didn't you ever tell me the truth about James?" "Because I killed him. My pride, my stupidity." "No." I cut in sharply. "The doctors killed him when they dismissed your symptoms. The same way you tried to dismiss mine." Silence filled a room, heavy with decades of unspoken pain. Finally, Everett spoke. "I'm staying with Marin at her house. Walter's moving in with his brother." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But there's a treatment program in Vermont. 6 months, specialized in trauma and anxiety. They have experience with patients who have severe allergies." Lorna's eyes darted between us. You'd let me come back? After everything? Not come back, I said firmly. Start over. But only if you do the work. Only if you face what really happened with James and what you tried to do to me. And the baby? I touched my stomach again. Will know their grandmother when she's ready to be known. Really known, not hidden behind walls of control and fear. As we left the hospital, Everett took my hand. You're either the most forgiving person I've ever met or the most strategic. I thought about cycles of pain, about how revenge and healing sometimes look remarkably similar. Maybe both, I said. Maybe that's what breaking the cycle takes. Behind us, through the hospital window, I could see Lorna watching us leave, one hand pressed against the glass. This time, when she reached for her medication, she didn't wave the nurse away. 6 months later, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing my dress over my now visible baby bump. The Vermont Treatment Center had called yesterday. Lorna was completing her program, and they wanted to arrange a supervised family session. Ready? Everett asked from the doorway. In his hands was a small box we'd received that morning from Lorna. I nodded, and he opened it. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a note. I found this in my mother's attic. It explains so much, maybe too much. The journal belonged to Lorna's mother, detailing her own struggles with control and fear. The last entry, dated just before her death, was an unfinished letter to Lorna. My darling daughter, I'm sorry for teaching you that love means control, for making you believe that protecting someone means owning them. She's breaking the cycle, I said quietly, touching the worn pages. Really breaking it. Walter met us at the treatment center, looking years younger despite the divorce proceedings. She's different, he said as we walked in. Really different. The family session room was bright, with comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. Lorna sat already waiting, her hands folded in her lap. The first thing I noticed was her medical alert bracelet, identical to mine. I've been baking, she said after we settled in the center's kitchen. They have protocols for allergen safety. She smiled slightly. Turns out I'm quite good at it when I'm not trying to prove something. Mom. Everett started, but she held up her hand. Let me finish. I've learned something important here. She took a deep breath. Control isn't protection. What I did, to James, to you, Marin, to this family, it wasn't about keeping anyone safe. It was about not feeling powerless. The therapist nodded encouragingly, and Lorna continued. I found these in my mother's things. She pulled out a stack of letters. She did the same things to me that I did to you, Everett. Made me doubt myself. Used my weaknesses against me. Called it love. Her voice cracked. But it's not love. It's fear. I touched my stomach as the baby kicked. Lorna's eyes followed the movement. I'd like to be part of your child's life, she said softly. Not as the controlling grandmother who needs to fix everything, but as someone who understands what it means to be different. To need protection sometimes, but not control. We'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. But we need to know this change is real. It is. She pulled out another letter, newer. I wrote to Camille's brother. He's agreed to repay Everett what he lost in the investment scam. It won't fix what I did, using Camille to hurt you both, but it's a start, Everett finished. After the session, as we walked through the center's garden, I found myself alone with Lorna. She stopped by a bench, touching the medical alert bracelet. You know what the hardest part was? She asked. Accepting that you and I are more alike than different. Both of us changed our names, running from our past. Both of us living with invisible threats. Both of us. Survivors, I finished. Not victims. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I named him James because it means supplanter, someone who takes another's place. I was so afraid of being replaced, I nearly destroyed everything trying to prevent it. I took her hand, placing it on my stomach where the baby was kicking. This little one? We're naming her Hope. Later that night, as Everett and I lay in bed, he asked, Do you really trust her change? I thought about the journal, about cycles of fear and control, about how healing sometimes requires walking through the darkest parts of ourselves. I trust that she's trying, I said finally. And sometimes that's the bravest thing we can do. On our nightstand sat the last page of Lorna's mother's letter, its final lines hauntingly familiar. The greatest act of love isn't holding on. It's learning when to let go. The baby kicked again, and I smiled, thinking about names and changes and the future we were building, not despite our scars, but because of them. Some cycles, it turns out, are meant to be broken. As my husband and I were talking, my mother-in-law suddenly approached and whispered something in his ear. His smile instantly faded, replaced by a look of anger, and without any warning, he yanked my hair and landed a hard punch to my face. I collapsed, dazed and terrified. Desperate for help, I called the police, but when they arrived, I was horrified to find that the officer was a friend of my husband. My heart sank as he dismissed my pleas, claiming I had no proof. With my immediate safety compromised and feeling utterly alone, I knew I needed a new plan, and that's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I still remember the first day I brought my daughter, Anna, home from the hospital. The joy was overwhelming, but so was the exhaustion. I'm Jennifer, 30 years old, trying to adjust to the whirlwind of motherhood. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and trying to keep up with the chaos that had taken over our home in Austin, Texas. The house was often a mess, with laundry piling up and the kitchen in a constant state of disarray. Michael, my husband, was working long hours, and I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. One particularly stressful afternoon, as I struggled to soothe Anna's cries, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I looked around at the untidy residence, feeling a pang of shame. I hadn't had a chance to clean up, and the sight of the dirty kitchen only added to my stress. When I opened the door, there stood Charlotte, Michael's mother. She was a force to be reckoned with, her presence commanding attention the moment she arrived. "Well, look at this," Charlotte said, stepping inside with a critical eye. "I see things haven't improved much since the last time I visited." I tried to muster a smile, but it felt strained. "Hi, Charlotte. I'm just a bit overwhelmed with everything right now." Charlotte's gaze swept over the living room, taking in the scattered toys and the pile of dishes in the kitchen. "Overwhelmed? It looks more like you've given up. Is this really how you plan to raise my granddaughter?" Her words stung, but I tried to stay calm. "I'm doing my best. It's just been a lot to handle." Charlotte's disapproval was palpable. She walked into the kitchen and raised an eyebrow at the state of it. "This place is a mess. How can you expect to manage anything if you can't even keep the house clean?" I felt my cheeks flush with humiliation. Michael's work schedule left me to handle everything on my own, and while I was trying, it was clear it wasn't enough for Charlotte. The front door opened, and Michael walked in, his face lighting up when he saw his mother. "Mom, what a surprise. I didn't know you were coming by." Charlotte immediately seized the opportunity. "Michael, just look at this. Your wife can't even manage to keep the house in order. It's like she's completely lost control." Michael's face fell as he glanced around, taking in the messy state of our home. "Jennifer, we need to talk about this. I know things are tough, but you have to prioritize better." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Michael, I'm trying. It's not as easy as it looks." Charlotte, ever the instigator, chimed in. "Being a mother is about more than just caring for the baby. It's about responsibility and managing your household." Michael's gaze shifted between his mother and me, his expression conflicted. "Mom, maybe we should try to help her understand what's at stake here," Michael suggested. "Help her understand?" Charlotte's voice grew sharper. "She needs to learn discipline. She's not living up to our family standards." The tension in the room was palpable. Michael, who usually stood by me, was now looking at me with a mixture of frustration and confusion. "Sophie, you need to get your act together. This isn't acceptable," he said. Before I could respond, Charlotte stepped closer to Michael, whispering something in his ear. Michael's face hardened, and he looked back at me with an unreadable expression. "Maybe you're right," he said reluctantly. "Maybe you need to learn the hard way." I felt my heart drop as Michael moved toward me. In a shocking burst of anger, he grabbed my hair and yanked it painfully. Before I could react, he threw a hard punch to my face. The force of it sent me reeling, and I staggered back, clutching my cheek as tears streamed down my face. I could barely process what had just happened. The pain was sharp, but the sense of betrayal was even worse. Anna, who had been quiet during the confrontation, began to cry, adding to my overwhelming distress. Desperation set in, and I reached for my phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. When the police officer arrived, I hoped for some relief, but my heart sank when I realized he was an old friend of Michael's. His demeanor was calm and dismissive as he listened to my report. "I'm afraid I can't do much without solid evidence," he said, glancing at Michael. "There's not enough here to act on." I was stunned. The officer, who should have been my ally, was siding with Michael. "But he hit me. Can't you do anything?" I pleaded. The officer shook his head. "Without clear proof, there's nothing I can do. Maybe next time try to gather more evidence before calling us." He left, leaving me feeling even more isolated. I looked at Michael, who had a cold, indifferent look on his face. Charlotte stood beside him, her expression one of smug satisfaction. The sense of betrayal from both Michael and the officer left me feeling utterly alone. As the door closed behind the officer, I sank to the floor, cradling Anna in my arms. The house that was supposed to be my home now felt like a prison. The physical pain from the punch was nothing compared to the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. This was the moment I realized my life had become something I couldn't tolerate. I knew I needed to make a change, but the road ahead seemed daunting. Michael's behavior, under Charlotte's influence, had crossed a line that could never be undone. I needed to find a way out, not just for myself, but for my daughter as well. In the midst of the chaos and despair, I made a silent vow to myself. I would find a way to escape this nightmare and build a life where Anna and I could be safe and happy. This was only the beginning of a journey that would test my strength and resilience in ways I never imagined. The days that followed the attack were some of the hardest I had ever faced. I was deeply shaken, but the physical and emotional pain from Michael's violence was overshadowed by a stronger feeling, determination. I knew I had to get out. I had to protect Anna and find a way to escape the toxic environment Michael and Charlotte had created. But how? It wasn't until a few days later that I found a glimmer of hope. Jenny, my old friend from college, had always been someone I could rely on. I reached out to her, hoping she could offer guidance. I was hesitant at first, not wanting to burden her with my problems, but desperation gave me the courage to call. "Jenny, it's Jennifer. I need your help," I said, my voice trembling as I spoke into the phone. "Things have gotten really bad. Michael, he hit me. The police didn't help, and I'm afraid to stay here any longer." Jenny's response was immediate and filled with concern. "Jennifer, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I'm an investigator now. I can help you. Let's meet and talk about what you need." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop. When I walked in, Jenny was already there, looking as composed as ever. I sat down across from her, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. "So, what's the plan?" Jenny asked, her eyes steady and focused. I took a deep breath. "I need to leave Michael, but I can't do it without proof of what's happening. I need to gather evidence to show that his behavior is abusive and that Charlotte's control over him is a big part of it." Jenny nodded. "We'll need to document everything. Do you have any recordings, messages, or evidence of the abuse?" I shook my head. "I don't, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Jenny's face softened with sympathy. "We'll start by gathering as much evidence as we can. We'll need to document your interactions with Michael and Charlotte. If you can, try to record any instances of abuse or manipulation." Over the next few weeks, Jenny and I worked tirelessly. She showed me how to use a hidden recording app on my phone to capture conversations and incidents. I recorded phone calls, text messages, and even began documenting my daily interactions with Michael and Charlotte. I was careful not to draw their suspicion while doing this, which was challenging given how closely they were monitoring me. One day, Charlotte called me while Michael was at work. I answered the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hello, Charlotte." "Jennifer," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Michael told me you've been causing trouble. I've been very patient, but it's clear you need to be reminded of your place." I recorded the entire conversation, capturing her manipulative tone and the way she spoke about Michael and me. It was disturbing to hear her undermine my efforts as a mother and wife, but it was crucial evidence. Jenny and I also planned for my eventual departure. We mapped out a strategy to leave when Michael was at work, ensuring that he wouldn't be around to stop me. Jenny helped me organize a safe place to stay temporarily, making sure Anna and I would have somewhere secure to go once we left. One night, as I lay in bed, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The decision to leave wasn't just about escaping Michael's physical abuse, but about breaking free from the suffocating control Charlotte had over our lives. I knew that this step would be dangerous and challenging, but I had to do it for Anna's sake. The day of our planned departure came, and I felt a knot of fear and excitement in my stomach. Michael was supposed to be at work, and Jenny had agreed to meet me at the house to help with the move. I spent the morning packing a few essentials, trying to stay calm and focused. As I was about to leave, I received a text from Jenny. "I'm outside. Are you ready?" My heart raced as I quickly gathered Anna and our things. I took one last look at the house that had been both a home and a prison. The clutter, the mess, it all symbolized the chaos and control that had plagued our lives. With a deep breath, I stepped out of the door, locking it behind me. Jenny and I loaded everything into her car and drove to her house. The journey was quiet, but filled with unspoken relief. I knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, but I also knew there was still a long way to go. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Once we arrived at Jenny's house, a wave of exhaustion washed over me. We unloaded our things and settled in. Jenny offered comfort and support, reminding me that this was just the first step in our plan. In the days that followed, Jenny and I focused on collecting more evidence and preparing for the next phase. We knew that exposing Michael and Charlotte's abuse would be crucial for our case. I was determined to see this through, no matter how challenging it might be. Jenny's support was invaluable, and her expertise as an investigator was a lifeline during this turbulent time. Together, we prepared for the crucial task of building a solid case against Michael and Charlotte, knowing that our efforts were not just about escape, but about seeking justice for the pain they had caused. As I settled into Jenny's home, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be fraught with obstacles, but I was ready to face them. With Jenny's help, this was just the beginning of a fight for freedom and justice that would test my strength and resolve. After moving to Jenny's house, my days were consumed by a relentless drive to gather evidence against Michael and Charlotte. The relief of leaving the abusive environment was tempered by the enormity of what lay ahead. We had to compile enough proof to expose their toxic behavior and secure our safety. Every day was a new challenge, but with Jenny's help, I felt more hopeful about what we could accomplish. Jenny and I spent countless hours organizing and reviewing the recordings and messages. I had managed to gather all the evidence, and we meticulously sorted through phone calls, texts, and videos. Each piece revealed a bit more of the abuse and manipulation that had been hidden from the world. One evening, as I was reviewing a particularly damning recording, I could hear Charlotte's voice clearly instructing Michael. It was unsettling to listen to her berate me and manipulate Michael into treating me poorly. "Michael, you need to remember who's in charge here." Charlotte's voice crackled through the speaker. "Jennifer is just a distraction. Don't let her get in the way of our plans." Hearing that was like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just Michael's actions I had to contend with, but Charlotte's insidious influence as well. I knew this recording would be crucial in showing the extent of their manipulation. Jenny helped me transcribe these conversations, ensuring that we had clear, detailed evidence to present. We also focused on documenting every instance of Michael's abusive behavior. Jenny advised me to reach out to any family members or friends who might have witnessed Charlotte's controlling ways or had seen Michael's violent tendencies. One of Michael's cousins, who had always been sympathetic towards me, agreed to speak up. She provided a written statement detailing her observations of Michael's aggressive behavior and Charlotte's interference in our marriage. With the evidence compiled, Jenny and I began to organize our presentation. We knew that simply having evidence wasn't enough. We needed to present it in a way that would be convincing and comprehensive. We categorized the materials into several key areas: incidents of abuse, manipulation by Charlotte, and Michael's erratic behavior. Jenny helped me prepare a detailed report summarizing each piece of evidence and its significance. We included timestamps and context for the recordings, ensuring that everything was as clear and precise as possible. It was a daunting task, but it was necessary to build a strong case. One day, Jenny and I met with a lawyer who specialized in domestic abuse cases. She reviewed our evidence and gave us crucial advice on how to proceed. "You have a solid case," she said, flipping through the documents and listening to the recordings, "but we need to ensure that everything is presented clearly. I'll help you file a restraining order and press charges." Her words were a beacon of hope. Knowing that we had legal support to back us up was incredibly reassuring. We worked with her to prepare the necessary paperwork and ensure that all our evidence was in order. The day of the court hearing arrived, and my nerves were frayed. Jenny and I walked into the courthouse, carrying the weight of our efforts and the hope for justice. The atmosphere was tense, and I could feel the gravity of the situation pressing down on me. Jenny stayed by my side, providing support and encouragement as we awaited our turn. When it was finally time to present our case, I felt a surge of adrenaline and fear. The evidence was overwhelming, and Jenny's legal expertise guided us through the process. We played the recordings, presented the documents, and shared the testimonies from Michael's cousin and other witnesses. The courtroom was quiet as the evidence unfolded. I could see the judge's reaction as he listened to the recordings and reviewed the evidence. It was a nerve-wracking experience, but I knew this was the culmination of all our hard work. As the hearing concluded, the judge's decision was imminent. Jenny and I waited anxiously for the verdict. It was a tense time, but I was hopeful that the evidence would be enough to secure a positive outcome. The days following the hearing were filled with anticipation. Finally, we received the news we had been waiting for. The judge had ruled in our favor. Michael and Charlotte would face legal consequences for their actions. It was a significant victory, but I knew there was still much work to be done. Jenny and I continued to work on securing my new apartment and finalizing our plans. The legal victory was just one step in our journey toward rebuilding a safe and independent life. With the support of Jenny and the legal system, I felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. Reflecting on these events, I realized that the fight for justice had been a transformative experience. It had tested my strength, resilience, and resolve, but with each step forward, I grew more confident in my ability to overcome the challenges that had once seemed insurmountable. With the court ruling in our favor, Jenny and I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The evidence we had so painstakingly gathered had paid off, but the final step, seeing Michael and Charlotte held accountable, was still ahead of us. The time had come to involve the authorities and ensure that justice was served. Jenny and I worked closely with our lawyer to coordinate with the police. We compiled a comprehensive dossier of evidence, including recordings, texts, and witness statements, and handed it over to the authorities. Jenny's expertise, combined with my first-hand accounts, made our case as robust as possible. On the day of the arrest, my heart raced with a mixture of fear and hope. Michael and Charlotte were still unaware of what was coming, and I was nervous about how they would react. Jenny stayed by my side, providing support and helping me stay focused. The police arrived at Michael and Charlotte's house in the afternoon. I watched from a distance, my emotions a tangled mess of anxiety and anticipation. Jenny had advised me to stay away from the scene for my safety and to avoid any direct confrontation. From what I could see, the officers were taking their time as they approached the house. It was an agonizing wait. Finally, after what felt like hours, Jenny received a call from one of the officers. Michael and Charlotte had been arrested. The weight of the news was almost overwhelming. The long, painful journey to this point had finally reached its climax, and the people who had tormented me were now facing consequences for their actions. That evening, as the sun set over Austin, I felt a profound sense of closure. It wasn't just about the legal victory. It was about reclaiming my life and asserting my right to safety and respect. With Michael and Charlotte facing charges, I could finally start to think about my future without the shadow of their abuse looming over me. In the days that followed, I worked on settling into my new apartment with my daughter. The move was physically and emotionally exhausting, but it also symbolized a new beginning. I took great care in setting up our home to be a peaceful and nurturing environment for my daughter. It was important for me to create a space where we could heal and start anew. Jenny continued to be a steadfast friend and supporter. She helped me navigate the complexities of my new life and ensured that I had access to the resources and support I needed. Her presence was a constant reminder of the strength that had carried me through this ordeal. The legal process continued, and I stayed updated on the proceedings. Michael and Charlotte's court dates were set, and I was prepared to testify if necessary. The legal system would hold them accountable for their abusive behavior, and I was determined to see it through. As I looked back on the journey, I was struck by the incredible support I had received from Jenny and the legal system. Their help had been instrumental in breaking free from the cycle of abuse and beginning a new chapter in my life. It was a reminder of the importance of resilience, courage, and seeking support when facing adversity. The day Michael and Charlotte were officially charged was a bittersweet moment. I felt a sense of justice being served, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the impact of their actions would linger. Nonetheless, the legal consequences they faced were a crucial step in holding them accountable and ensuring that they could no longer inflict harm on anyone else. As I settled into my new life, I reflected on the strength it took to confront and overcome such a deeply painful situation. The support of friends, the legal victories, and my own determination had all played a vital role in helping me rebuild my life. I was now in a place where I could focus on creating a positive and loving environment for my daughter, free from the shadow of abuse and manipulation. In the end, my journey was a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of standing up against abuse. With each day that passed, I felt stronger and more capable of facing the future with hope and confidence.
My husband cheated on me 2 years ago, which led to our divorce. His younger sister was the object of his liaison. I received an invitation to their wedding from them as well. I felt like my mother had misled me too when she claimed she would be at the ceremony. "I'll do something fun. Just wait and see," she then said to me. I'm Ava, and I had a scheme to make them both pay for it. I was my husband's supervisor at the same company where we both worked. Although he lacked complete reliability, he was amiable and genuine. It was my responsibility to train him and teach him the work. He was anxious about the new work at first, but we became close over time. "Ava, are you free on our next day off?" he asked me one day. His level of confidence outside the office startled and delighted me, making my heart skip a beat. We used to go out together after that. When we started dating 3 months ago, he said, "Ava, will you be my girlfriend?" Other managers complimented him as he had improved greatly in his work. "Ava, will you marry me?" he asked me after receiving a promotion and moving to a new department. With pleasure, I concurred. Our wedding went well, and my parents and younger sister Lauren hit it up with Scott right away. Scott and Lauren, who were the same age, hit it up right away. She often stated, "You are so lucky to marry such a kind man like Scott, and it looks like people at work have high expectations for him." Lauren had just broken up with her fiancé and seemed to be yearning for marriage, frequently expressing how jealous she was of me. After our wedding, I maintained working and taking care of domestic tasks, supporting Scott both at work and in our personal lives, or at least I felt I was supporting him. About a year after our marriage, Scott started arriving home later and later, and we hardly ever had dinner together. "Scott, it's been a while since we've discussed work. Is everything in order?" I inquired. "There's nothing wrong," he answered. "You've been arriving home late every day, though. If I am of any assistance, please let me know." "There isn't," he remarked, appearing irritated. He used to talk to me about everything, but lately he appeared offended when I brought up work. During his days off, He would either go outside to get some fresh air or sleep all day, claiming to be exhausted. I felt like we hadn't been spending much time together, so I gave Scott some advice. "Hey Scott, how about we go to a spa together during next month's holiday? My sister recommended a restaurant to us." "A spa?" "Yes, it's a place where we can heal our body and mind from daily stresses at work," I explained. He seemed busy, so I scheduled a hotel reservation with the spa for him. 1 week before the spa excursion, I asked Scott, "What time should we leave the house next week?" "Huh? Oh, is the spa trip next week? I neglected to mention, I have to travel on a business trip next weekend." "What? But you've known about the spa trip for quite some time." "Well, it's work, so it can't be helped," he remarked. "Right, I see." Scott's department seemed to be busier than ever, with frequent business excursions. This time, too, I had no choice but to quit. Scott headed out on his work trip early in the morning, as usual. Well, I thought to myself, if everything had gone according to plan, we would have been on our way to the spa by now. While I was feeling sad, I got a phone call from the hotel where I had made a reservation. Despite having sent a cancellation email, it seems they did not receive it owing to an error, and they contacted us to confirm our arrival time. I thought I might as well invite Lauren. Lauren had left the house in the morning and was not coming home when I called my parents. I therefore made the desperate decision to take my mother to the spa. It almost seemed impossible that my mother could make it at such short notice, but to my surprise, she said yes. "Are you serious? Is it all right to leave Dad alone at this time?" "I'm more worried about you than your father," she added. She seemed to have decided to come along since she had noticed my recent low spirits. "Thanks, Mom. I should be the one expressing gratitude to you. I'm pleased to be able to have a trip with you." I wanted to enjoy the vacation with my mother, which I hadn't done in a long time. However, when we got to the hotel, we witnessed something shocking. "Mom, look at that!" At the hotel, we saw Scott, who was meant to be on his business trip. He was arm in arm with a woman, appearing joyful as they approached the hotel where we were meant to stay. The instant they entered the hotel, the woman with Scott turned her face in our direction for a moment. "You've got to be kidding," I thought. That woman with Scott was Lauren, my sister. After that, I was in a state of shock and don't recall anything about how I got home. After drinking some tea my mother made for me, my feelings gradually started to calm down. He had been misleading me. Not just Scott. I had also been duped by Lauren. After calming down, I contacted Scott's department. As I had expected, his department had been striving to cut their workload for the past few years, and they were not making employees go on business trips or perform any overtime as much as possible. When I told my mother about the days when Scott arrived home late or was on business trips, it turned out that Lauren was also not at home during those days. It was all starting to make sense. All those days when he came home late and said he was on business trips, he was actually meeting up with Lauren. When I learned the truth, anger welled up inside me rather than sadness. "Mother, I'll divorce Scott. I don't want to see Lauren, so I won't visit the house for a while." She kept silent but understood my feelings. I prepared everything before Scott came back. I arranged the divorce papers, signed a new lease for a house, packed my belongings, and moved into an apartment where I could stay until I officially moved into the new house. I left the divorce papers and a letter for Scott at the house. All the details regarding alimony and such would be handled through my lawyer, as stated in the letter. I also blocked all his contacts. I didn't want Lauren and Scott to know my new address, so I didn't tell my parents. Since we worked at the same company, we occasionally passed each other, but I completely ignored him. Realizing how hopeless the situation was, he quickly agreed to the divorce. He didn't tell anyone the reason for our divorce, but our colleagues seemed to have sensed it and avoided the subject. 5 years passed, and I kept my distance from him and my family. One day, after finishing work and returning to my room, I found my mother standing in front of me. "Mom, what's wrong?" "I have something I want to tell you," she said, showing me an invitation. "This is from Scott and Lauren." It turned out that Lauren had left our family home and moved in with Scott. I thought they might get married, but I never expected them to have a wedding ceremony and invite our parents. "So, Mom, are you going?" "Of course I am," she replied. "I see," I said, feeling like I was the only one who couldn't forgive them. They must have known this, which is why they invited only our parents to the wedding. I had no right to say anything since I had distanced myself from both Scott and my parents. Seeing me depressed, my mother smiled. "Don't worry, I'm not going because I forgive them. Just you wait and watch." On the day of the wedding, my mother called me through a video call. "I don't want to see their faces," I said, about to hang up, but I remembered my mother's words and kept the call connected. The screen showed a slideshow that was being presented. The MC began introducing the slides. This slideshow was made by the bride's mother. She gathered photos from her beloved daughter's birth to the present and created this slideshow. I was surprised that my mother, who wasn't good with technology, could create such a slideshow. It brought back a feeling of depression inside me. "Mom, you did this much for Lauren?" But in the next moment, I was captivated by the screen. "This isn't Lauren." The slideshow started with a photo of me when I was born. The MC continued, "So cute. There's a resemblance to Lauren somehow." As the guests watched with a relaxed atmosphere, Lauren's expression stiffened. The MC continued, "Since she was young, the bride has always been devoted to her family. She was a diligent student and succeeded in entering her desired university. After starting her job, she became a very reliable employee at the company." Lauren's friends and colleagues who knew about her student days and workplace began to buzz with excitement. "Huh? Is that a photo from the welcome party at university? Lauren didn't go to such a good university, did she? Hey, isn't that a photo from the company's welcome party? Wait a minute. Looking closely, it's completely different. Wait, if this isn't Lauren?" Scott also seemed to have noticed. "What the hell is this? This isn't Lauren." The MC, unaware of the bride and groom's pale faces, continued to advance the slides. And then she met the groom, Scott, at the company. According to the bride's mother, she initially taught and trained the groom as his instructor. Then the two got married. What followed were photos from my wedding with Scott. The MC couldn't hide their confusion, realizing something was wrong. The MC got quiet. At that moment, my mother took the stage and grabbed the microphone. "From here on, I'll take over and explain," she said smoothly while changing the slides. Even after marriage, my daughter supported him in both personal and professional aspects. However, due to how busy Scott got, he couldn't find any time for her, so my daughter planned a spa trip to help relieve his stress. "Wait, please," Lauren said, her face pale, and Scott made frantic attempts to stop my mother. But she continued with the slides. The next photo showed Scott and Lauren entering the spa hotel together, looking very close to each other. Finally, the bride and groom appeared in the photos, and both the MC and the guests fell silent. Scott declined the trip planned by my daughter due to a business trip he said couldn't be helped. My mother said, her voice steady and strong. "He had to go on a business trip for work, so my daughter invited me to the spa. That's where we saw his affair." When my mother said those words, everyone started to talk and buzz about what she had revealed. "Huh? An affair? And this wedding is for Lauren and Scott, right? Could it be that this wedding is based on their affair?" To answer the guests' questions, my mother continued slowly. "Scott swore to marry my beloved daughter Ava and make her happy, but instead, He betrayed her. To make matters worse, he cheated on Ava with her own sister, Lauren. Mother, stop it already. Today is my wedding day. Why won't you celebrate my happiness? Lauren cried as she tried to stop our mother. Still, my mother coldly looked at Lauren and said, I have always wished for your happiness, but you've ruined it. First, Ava always considered not only herself, but also the happiness of her family. What about you, Lauren? Have you ever thought about how much Ava would be hurt by your actions? Well, she always seems so happy. It's not fair, Lauren responded. So, instead of being happy for your family, you just got jealous, huh? My mother asked. Mother-in-law, please stop. She is your precious daughter too, right? If that's the case, can't you celebrate our new beginning? Why are you doing this? Scott pleaded. I don't want to become a family with someone as dishonest as you. I saw it clearly at today's ceremony. If you really intend to start something with Lauren, why didn't you invite a single person from your own company? If you're going to have such a grand ceremony, shouldn't you apologize to Ava? It's selfish to invite me and her father to the wedding without making any effort like that. But Ava has been ignoring me all this time, Scott protested. Of course she has. After what you've done, it's only natural, my mother replied. But that's all in the past, isn't it? Scott argued. Do you think her wounds will heal in just 5 years? Do you think you can regain our trust in such a short time? Don't be ridiculous, my mother said. After those words, my mother angrily left the venue with my father. I could hear my mother's voice from the cell phone. The reason for your divorce. Did you see that, Ava? Yes, I replied. I'm sorry for reminding you of painful things, she said. I just can't stand seeing those two act like nothing happened. No, thank you. I feel relieved. It's like you said everything I wanted to say. That's right, Ava. You always keep everything to yourself. I thought it was too kind of you not to tell your colleagues the reason for your divorce. After that, my mother sent me the recording of her conversation with Scott during the wedding. As my mother said, even if time passes, it's not easy to forget. Moreover, Scott showed no signs of remorse, calling it a thing of the past. I decided to start my second life by giving Scott a proper punishment. I chose to do it during his presentation at the company. It was open to volunteers from various departments, so I quickly signed up and entered the conference. When it was Scott's turn, his supervisor, unaware of his remarriage, said, Scott, you seem even more motivated today because you just got married. Yes, I will do my best for my family, he replied happily. He should have known I was in the room, but he didn't. I became even more determined and played the recorded audio I received from my mother. The participants were surprised by the sudden noise, but as they learned about his affair with my sister after marrying me, they began to accuse him. Scott, didn't you say that the reason for the divorce was a difference in values? Someone asked. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Oh, really? Did you say something like that? Well, I can't understand a value that involves cheating with your own wife's sister. I apologized for mixing personal matters into this important presentation. I have decided to quit as of today. I endured it because I liked this company, but I cannot bear to be in the same place as him any longer. Just as I was about to leave, the board members intervened to stop me. Wait a minute, Ava. You're an essential asset to our company. If someone should leave, it should be Scott. Huh, but me? I've been expected to have a promising future, Scott protested. We had expectations in the past, but lately, you've been wearing worn-out clothes and you're not focused. It seems like you've completely lost the problem-solving abilities you had before. We're not expecting a lot from you anymore, they said. Lauren, who had always been awful at housework and did little when she lived with her parents, became a full-time housewife after marriage. Apparently, she left most of the house tasks for Scott to undertake, even while he experienced challenges at work. I couldn't give Scott advice like I used to, and he started making more issues at work. The fact that he had cheated on his wife's sister spread swiftly inside the workplace, and his reputation went bad fast. Once regarded and seen as a rising star, he was now viewed with distrust and scorn by his colleagues. His reputation was further damaged when his job started to suffer and he committed more errors. At the following board meeting, it was determined that I would stay at the company, but Scott would be sent to a remote area. He was essentially being demoted, with plans to lay him off in the near future. The corporation couldn't afford to maintain someone who had produced so much uproar and problems. Lauren, who had been enjoying her life as a housewife with his money, swiftly abandoned him when she found out about the relocation. She shifted to another man without hesitation, thinking she could easily find another method to sustain her lifestyle. However, the man she chose turned out to be a typical freeloader. He had no employment and no desire, and he started living off Lauren's money without contributing anything. Now, Lauren is suffering from his obligations. She's urgently working 2 jobs, day and night, just to make ends meet. She's overworked and miserable, a long cry from the carefree life she had envisioned. She had hoped to move on fast and avoid the consequences of her actions, but reality struck her hard. As they say, what goes around comes around. Erroneous actions will eventually catch up with you. Seeing Scott and Lauren in such a state, I finally felt a sense of closure. As I observed them struggling, it dawned on me that their betrayal had finally brought about their demise. Scott lost his profession and reputation, while Lauren lost her affluent life. They both faced the repercussions of their conduct, and it brought me a sense of calm. I felt rejuvenated and prepared to begin a new life. I could finally move forward without the weight of their betrayal hanging over me. I was free to establish a future on my own terms, without the ghosts of the past holding me back. I focused on my profession and started taking on new challenges at work. My co-workers, who had seen me bear so much with elegance and bravery, backed me. I was given a promotion in appreciation of my commitment and diligence. It was a fresh start, and I was determined to make the most of it. In my private life, I started getting back in touch with former pals and meeting new ones. I became a volunteer and joined a local community group because I enjoyed being of service to others. These activities helped me recover my confidence and reminded me of the goodness in others. I also took time for self-care, researching activities I had neglected during my marriage. I started painting again, a passion I had always liked but had put aside. The creative process was therapeutic, helping me to express my emotions and find healing. Eventually, I even opened my heart to the prospect of love again. I went on dates, met new people, and learnt to trust again. It wasn't easy, but I understood that not everyone was like Scott and Lauren. There were wonderful, honest people out there, and I deserved happiness. As the years went by, I found myself happier and more fulfilled than I had ever been. The agony of the past had dissipated, replaced by the delight of new experiences and the satisfaction of personal growth. Scott and Lauren were distant memories, reminders of lessons learned, but no longer sources of misery. Their lives, on the other hand, remained to be shaped by the consequences of their acts. Scott never recovered his career, shifting from one low-paying position to another. Lauren continued to be mired in debt from her new boyfriend, keeping her in a never-ending cycle of financial hardship. Ultimately, I understood that leading a morally upright and compassionate life is the path to true happiness. Lingering misery is the only thing that betrayal and dishonesty can provide. I opted to live my life with honesty and compassion, and in doing so, I found the peace and pleasure I had been seeking all along.
As the head of the household, my commands are non-negotiable. Should you choose not to heed my instructions, divorce will be our only option, regardless of his ongoing affair. Despite his attempts to control me, I questioned why I must adhere to everything he dictates. Fine, let's get a divorce then, I declared. Subsequently, I transferred all loans into his name, hoping he would recognize the extent of my contribution to our life together. My name is Carol, I'm 36 years old, and I work as a system engineer. It has been 6 years since I married my husband, John. We met through our jobs with my company, where I was an engineer, subcontracted work to his company. During a temporary assignment at his company, he approached me with kindness, leading us to gradually get to know each other outside of work. After a period of dating, he proposed and I accepted. Upon marriage, I left my job at the company. Being an engineer was demanding, often leaving me overworked, both physically and mentally, and the pay was insufficient. Concerned about not having enough time to spend with my husband and the potential strain on our relationship, I decided to become a freelancer. This decision allowed me more time for household chores and to spend with my husband. Initially, my income as a freelancer wasn't substantial, but thanks to my engineering experience, I eventually attracted more clients and started earning more. I was astonished at how quickly my income grew and was thankful for my husband's financial support during the times I earned less. I diligently performed household chores and experimented with various recipes to make my husband happy, for which he expressed gratitude, enhancing my happiness. In the early days, we respected each other and shared a happy life. However, a few years in, my husband proposed buying a new house, a suggestion that surprised me given his usual disregard for savings. I suggested saving more money, but he dismissed the idea, believing his income sufficient, unaware that our comfortable lifestyle was sustained by my increased earnings. Despite his belief that we hadn't faced financial difficulties since our marriage, it was my income that had bolstered our household budget, a fact I kept from him to protect his self-esteem. As our lifestyle remained unchanged, I surmised that my income must have significantly increased, a concept he seemed not to grasp fully. I couldn't believe what my husband said. However, he seemed enthusiastic about building a new home, and I had no way of stopping him. What kind of house do you have in mind? I had to find a way to build a low-cost home while accommodating my husband's increasing demands. But fulfilling all these conditions would significantly raise the cost. Isn't it a big deal? It's a once-in-a-lifetime purchase, and my income should be enough, right? I pondered the basis of his confidence. At that moment, I regretted not informing my husband about my income increase. I thought revealing it might calm him. John, it's about household expenses, but actually, I'd also contribute a significant amount from my income. For some reason, he didn't believe me. Don't lag like that, he dismissed. No, I'm not lying. I wished for him to consider a more affordable house, but he refused to listen and took out a loan for a house he could barely afford with his salary. Initially, I thought we managed our finances reasonably, but over the years, my husband's spending became more reckless. He indulged in luxuries like brand-name clothes and watches, and he went out drinking nightly with his juniors, although he worked overtime to compensate. These spending habits became increasingly hard to ignore. Despite all this, he was determined to build a house, and eventually he made it happen. Wow, this is a really nice house. A house is a clear sign of success, isn't it? He was right. The new house was awesome, spacious, beautiful, and comfortable. My workroom expanded, allowing space for a large desk and more comfortable work conditions, enhancing my productivity. However, the monthly mortgage payments still caused me anxiety. My husband seemed oblivious to the fact that we were paying off a long-term loan every month. The house in his name and his habit of overspending meant his account was always empty. Consequently, I had to transfer my income into his account to cover the mortgage. Frustrated, I decided it was time to address his spending. Don't you think you've been spending too much lately? I want you to consider things like the mortgage for the house, I said. Upon hearing this, my husband frowned and rebutted me. What are you talking about? How do we manage to live a normal life even after purchasing the house? If that's the case, then there's no issue. You're overly concerned with minor details. Or is it that you're just bad at managing money, and that's why you think we don't have enough? That's not my problem. Wait a minute, I interjected. I'm constantly figuring out how to save money for our daily living expenses with the money you provide, and I supplement it with my earnings for the mortgage and other bills. So please, don't speak to me in that manner. What's gotten into you, really? Besides, the amount you contribute isn't all that much, so don't act as if you're doing something grand. The one who earns the most is the most important, which makes me the most important. Don't bother sharing your opinions, my husband declared, aiming to silence me. I was taken aback by my husband's change in attitude. He used to be kind and considerate when we first got married. However, since then, our relationship has become strained. We barely talk, and sometimes we don't even greet each other. My husband had started working overtime more than before and often returned home late at night. I pondered whether it was feasible to continue our married life like this, living under the same roof without real communication. Perhaps it might be better to consider a divorce, though I wished for reconciliation. After much thought, I decided to take the initiative to reach out to him. However, my resolve was immediately crushed when, on a weekday trip to town to buy a birthday present for a friend, I spotted him. He wasn't at work as expected, but was in town, dressed casually and walking with a young woman I didn't recognize. I couldn't believe it, but instantly suspected an affair. To uncover the truth, I hired a private investigator. 3 weeks later, I received the investigation results and visited the detective agency. My husband was indeed having an affair with a work colleague, and their relationship had been ongoing for about 2 years. I realized why my husband had suddenly begun spending extravagantly and coming home late under the guise of overtime 2 years ago. It was all because of his affair. Anger surged within me, especially after enduring his verbal abuses. He was the one having an affair, yet I felt pathetic for trying to protect his self-esteem and our marriage. I decided to cast aside all my doubts and act immediately. When I rushed back home, my husband was lounging on the sofa, engrossed in a sports program. I stood between the TV and him, spreading out the evidence of his affair right in front of him. "Explain this," I demanded as I presented him with the photo evidence. He seemed surprised for a moment, but quickly changed his attitude. "Oh, that's Sandra. She's my new wife." "New wife? What are you talking about?" "Well, now that you know, there's no point in hiding it. Unfortunately, you're no longer needed." "What are you saying?" "Frankly, I no longer have any use for you in my life. But Sandra doesn't want to do household chores, so you can stay and do the housework for her." "What? I would never do something like that." "Are you crazy? I would never do something like that." When I said that, my husband's face turned red with anger. "I'm the breadwinner in this household, so my orders are absolute. If you can't listen to me, then it's divorce." Despite having an affair, my husband was still trying to control me. "Why do I have to listen to him?" "Fine, let's get a divorce." "Huh? First of all, you had an affair, so we can't continue our marriage like this. Let's just get a divorce already." My husband was taken aback, but soon agreed with me. "Oh, all right. Don't come crying to me later. But you have to help me with changing the names on the utility bills and the car loans we just booked." Soon, I changed all the loans into my husband's name and divorced him. He probably thought it was over, but for me, it was just the beginning. You should realize how much I supported your life. The day after the divorce was finalized, I was already relaxing in my new apartment. Then I received a bunch of calls from my ex-husband. Since he had not yet paid me any compensation, I had not blocked his number. When I answered, he sounded flustered and said he needed to talk. I reluctantly agreed to meet him at a cafe, but he brought his mistress with him. "Well, you two look great together. What's going on? Why didn't you tell me every month a large amount of money is being deducted for loans? And why are the food expenses, car loans, utilities, and everything else so high? What are you trying to do by pushing all of that onto me, huh? I divorced you and left that house, so that's only natural. I don't have any other intentions. Shut up, this is fraud. I'll sue you." My ex-husband and his mistress glared at me while holding each other's arms. They both said it was my fault, but I couldn't give in to such ridiculous accusations. "It's your fault for not understanding the situation properly. I showed you various documents, didn't I? And since the loan for the house was originally in your name, it's only natural that you should pay for it. Until now, I've been putting the necessary money into your account. How can you, with just a small income, be putting that much money? As an ex-husband with poorer comprehension skills." I explained everything to him. I was earning money as a freelance engineer, and currently, my annual income is around $200,000. "What do you say? Is that true?" Upon learning that I was earning much more than him, my ex-husband was surprised. "But whether you know it or not, it doesn't matter anymore. More importantly, since I haven't properly claimed compensation yet, I will do so through a lawyer. Are you trying to swindle money from us? I'm just using my rightful claim. I will also make claims against your mistress, and that's exactly what I did. I received compensation from both of them for the emotional distress they caused me. By the way, the woman my ex-husband had an affair with was devastated to learn that he wasn't using his own money to pay for the loan. The next day, she disappeared from his life. Their affair was just like any other, and it ended when the money ran out. My ex-husband now lives a lonely life, struggling to pay off his loan and make ends meet while commuting between work and home. He deserves the punishment he got, but apparently he couldn't accept it and spread the news of his affair around the office. His mistress claimed that he was abusing her, and they ended up in a messy quarrel. However, since they both lost their credibility, no one believed either of them. It seems that my ex-husband's financial troubles only worsened, and he eventually got demoted and received a pay cut due to his inability to focus on his work because of his mounting debts. It's all his own fault, and frankly, he deserves it. On the other hand, I was nervous when I first moved into my new high-rise apartment, but now I'm able to relax and enjoy my life here. I may not be interested in marriage or romance for a while, but that doesn't mean I want to be alone forever. If I meet someone in the future, I hope we can build a mutually supportive relationship based on what I've learned from this experience. For now, I'll focus on working hard and making the most of my time for myself.